Hello, everybody. It's so good to be back on Inflection Point. It's such an amazing conversation that we have lined up for you today. As you know, Inflection Point is where we have conversations with entrepreneurs, with startups, and with individuals that have in some way managed to pivot, to evolve, to adapt, to change their strategies in order to be successful. And this has come up from my many years as an advisor to businesses and to startups, learning how they've been able to just change their trajectory in order to succeed in whatever they're doing. And today, this conversation is going to be super interesting because I have my good friends here with me, and we all have a similar but not so similar story about transitioning from corporate into entrepreneurship. And I think this is a really timely conversation because so many people, with all the uncertainties that are happening, we had COVID 2020, 2021. We have most recently the US administration announcements that have cost lots of African jobs, and many people are feeling uncertain. Or there are also people who are wondering how to start side hustles, how to get multiple active income streams, and they're not very sure about how to do that. So I personally have been laid off twice. I think the first time I was laid out, I was laid off, sorry. I was quite young and I had no idea, how to navigate this space. But the second time, I think I was a little bit more prepared. I had years in between. I had God's guidance. So when we had a conversation, just as ladies, a couple of weeks ago, I thought, why don't we bring this conversation to you guys? And let's see what we can learn together. And we think actually we might be able to package a masterclass. So if you want to be able to go deeper, to understand how you can prepare yourself effectively to transition from the corporate world into entrepreneurship, into your side hustle, into your business, we'll have a masterclass and I'll announce the details later. But for today, I want to introduce my guests. Actually want to ask them to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about who they are and what they do, and then we'll get into the gist of the conversation. So welcome. I'll start with you, Saitone, and then we'll go this way.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Saitone Riga. I am a daughter of God, a wife, a mother, entrepreneur, and I also wear many hats. I'm also an author and a podcaster at Healing Growth, where I talk about healing trauma in an African context.
Amazing. Thank you, Saitone.
Great.
Yes, Naomi.
Hi, everyone. I am Naomi Mbugwa Mutinda. I am a seasoned sales, marketing, commercial operations leader with about almost 18 years experience in a highly regulated industry. As an entrepreneur, I am a founder and I've built a brand that I'm very thankful to God for called Treasured Scents, a thriving fragrance brand. Built largely via social media, but now we do have a brick and mortar store. And in this space of having transitioned, I'm also hoping to mentor, coach, and help other people build brands for impact. So,
I love it. Thank you, Naomi.
Yes.
All right, May.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. My name is May Kaptuya, and I am also a customer of Naomi here. As we ladies like to smell good.
Yes.
But apart from that, I am a workforce planning consultant, expert, and I run an organization called Kotoya Solutions, for which we offer workforce planning solutions. And apart from that, I'm also very passionate about the youth and unemployment and finding solutions around this big challenge that we face in Africa and in Kenya. So we'll talk more about that.
Hey, that is awesome. That's great. Lovely to have you three ladies here today. So let me start with my own little story. Excuse me. So I said the first time I was laid off, and also because this was such a long time ago, I'd actually forgotten about it.
Wow.
But I was working for an American company that has actually since died. And I was around 24, 25, and I could tell something was happening, but I didn't know what to do. And so when I got laid off, I had just moved out of home, gotten my two-bedroom house in Donholm. I was so excited. The reason I was excited is because I used to live in Kahawa West. Those days there was no Thika Road. Nini. It was so
dual
traffic.
carriage.
Oh my
Yeah.
God! So moving to Eastlands was like the best thing
Yeah.
for me. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. But then, just the way life works, I got into advertising, I got into banking, and then most recently I was in a payments technology company, a global one. And around the time of COVID, and maybe it was triggered by COVID, but I think it was also just triggered by the fact that the funding we had received to be able to de-risk our innovations, we could see it coming to an end. And I remember feeling a strong sense of uncertainty, like something is going to shift, something is going to change. And a lot of us, even our colleagues, were talking about it and saying, are we going to continue being here? And I just remember praying, and I had a little prayer journal. So if you don't have one of those, I highly recommend keeping one. It's just good to keep track of your thoughts and what you're thinking and what you're praying about. So I kept a little prayer journal. And I wrote in it, I have such a strong sense of uncertainty. I feel there's going to be a restructuring happening at this organization. And Lord, I'm not ready. I have 2 children that I'm fully responsible for. I'd say mostly responsible for. They are in expensive schools. Do I pull them out? I had a mortgage at that point, so I didn't feel financially ready. But I think more importantly is I didn't feel even mentally ready, even in terms of purpose. And so what had happened before is I had started volunteering to coach startups and to support startups and entrepreneurs. So I asked God to just help me monetize it so that I was ready. And I had a figure in mind. I just did some calculations, how much my mortgage was, what my debts were. And I just prayed about it and I wrote it down. And I completely forgot about it until last year, September, when I got... so I continued to work at this same organization for about 4 years. And then last year, September, I got the redundancy notice. I was one amongst, I think, 4 in the country. But, the global restructuring happened everywhere. And, first of all, I was so shaken because it meant to me that my main source of income and livelihood had gone. Then I just felt like my eyes being driven to pick this little journal, which I hadn't written in it ever since, by the way. But when I opened it and I saw this page and I saw that I had actually kind of like spoken into my future and God had honored the request. So the redundancy package that I got was enough for me to actually clear off what I needed to clear off and to leave okay while I figure out my next. But the best thing for me was in the 4 years I'd been able to build my side hustle, which by the way I fully declared, like I didn't do this chini ya maji, I declared it where I was. And I was able to get good gigs and good contracts with accelerator hubs and entrepreneurship support organizations and with innovation agencies. So I really didn't feel the change. And I'm so grateful because in fact, even when I stopped going to the office formally, I actually had my own things just moving on, and I've continued to do so. I've been able to talk about innovation, and I'm so grateful. So if I contrast my first time and my second time, I feel like I'm more prepared this time round. And when we're having a conversation with these ladies about how do you jump out of corporate, how do you separate your own identity, how do you plan your money, I thought this is actually a really good conversation to have out there, so that of course everyone's journey is different, but you might pick a thing or two.
So for me, I worked in marketing, digital marketing, and that's what I've been my entire career. I worked for an organization I loved, and I loved the work I was doing. However, I was there maybe 4.5 years. But for 3.5 years, there was a thing that was, there can be an issue that is bugging. And so for me, it was a frustration. And I really felt like I need to leave, I need to move. But every single time we'd pray about it, God would say no. And he said no for 3.5 years. And I remember even at one point, my husband went to another country, and it's the thing that I keep complaining about. And he's like, he puts it, and the person prays and says, "Tell your wife it's not yet time."
Wow.
And I know it was really crazy. And so I kept at it. And then COVID happened. And what I was telling people is, for me, COVID, for most people, it came March. But for me, I'd started seeing the signs in December. And what I recognize now is that I had anxiety around it. Looking back, what I'd tell myself is to pray more. But I had a lot of anxiety, and I think that plus everything just literally made work harder for me because I was carrying the anxiety of what is this thing going to do, and the fear that COVID brought. And so when March came, I had already stopped working in the office for maybe a month before, and I was working from home. But there's a way in which COVID just made people's lives harder. And so for me, lack of childcare, and I was still working, it made things very crazy. So at some point, my husband was like, "It's okay, God will take care of us." And I prayed and wrote the letter. And then on the day I was supposed to give it, I had a meeting, and that was when they announced that, restructuring, and, they made the decision. But literally, I had written it, I had grieved for maybe about 2 weeks prior. And so it was a very interesting transition. So in the person I am now is completely different from the person I was then. There's a lot of things that God needed me to work through. That's how the podcast was born. I've written a book out of that. There's things that I needed to deal with in the years that came after that I couldn't have done if I was working. Yeah. And so for me, that it was very key that to see God's hand in everything. I think one of the things is financially I was not as prepared as I thought, because I left thinking I was just going to go and get another job.
Oh.
Yes. I knew I was leaving, but for me, there was only one transition way out. Like it was from this to this. So I think for me, that was one of the things that I wish I had thought about, or even been able to expand options, because how you think you're going to leave and what will be next, you don't always have it figured out. And how you imagine it might not be how it happens.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think for me, that would be the one thing. But I'm really grateful to God, because I am more the person that I imagined and thought I would be now. And this would never have happened had I not been able to leave at that time and to do the work that I've done since.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Okay.
What's your story, Naomi?
Some similarities, some differences.
Yes.
When you reflected on that time back in the day that something happened to you, I think one moment, even when we had our conversation, that really changed my view about employment and corporate was I was working for a very big organization where people used to go and retire. It was fairly stable, fairly... And for the first time in ever, let me say ever, there was a redundancy.
Yeah, you're like, what?
And we shut down multiple countries in 4 hours.
Wow.
And I was fairly young in my career. I was there working hard, grinding, and all those things. And I'm like, wait a minute. This can actually happen. That you can have worked so hard, made certain sacrifices, and then the company just decides to take you home. That shook me. And any opportunity I have to someone share, I know that when that happened, something changed in me in terms of how I viewed corporate, in terms of more than anything else, the sacrifices I made for work.
Wow.
I worked through my first maternity leave.
Wow.
No one asked me, no one, anybody. It's something
just
for
volunteered
it's
yourself.
something for you're dedicated to your, and there's nothing wrong with dedication. But when I reflect about that sacrifice, say for example, the company, I was one of the people who were laid off at that particular point. How would I have felt about that level of sacrifice? You understand? So it shifted something for me. Now, coming back to 2024, I resigned from my job, and people thought I was mad. They thought two things. Either I'm mad or I'm married to a very rich guy. Like in this economy, how is it that how is it that you are up and up until you decided you're leaving? But I was I was enjoying the work I was doing. I just wasn't enjoying the environment I was working in. And it came with a lot of stressors. Now, that also meant, also on evaluating, the stressors therefore resulted in a lot of health issues. So not only physical health, because I was sick a lot. I mean, I have very young children, so they get a flu, you know what happens to you as a parent, you go down. Now me, I used to go down at every instant. I was down, I was sick. So my immunity, potentially because of stress or whatever it is, so I was constantly sick. The other thing is when I look at the state of my relationships, you know, whether it's my marriage or my family, my parents, my sisters, when I reflect, because I was constantly traveling, I was constantly busy. My mind was constantly on the job. You're at home, but you're not at home. My kids, more than anything else, my children, when I evaluated, when I'd travel, what would happen, sometimes I'd be told, oh, this happened to, and I'm like, that doesn't happen, when I'm home, but it somehow happens when I've traveled. So I fell ill, very ill, December 2023 with malaria. Of course, I can't blame that to the work, but it was on work travel. I'd never gotten malaria before. I was so sick, I think to the point of delirium. Wow. That's the point at which, and then I remember even spiritually, that's the point at which, because I was trying to pray and I'm like, wait, why is prayer even so difficult? I can't, and that's the first time now when I evaluated and I realized, hey, wait, there are a lot of areas of my life that, yes, I enjoy the job, I enjoy my team, I enjoy all these things, but when I really evaluate there's something here. And that's the first time I feel like God put in my heart the word sabbatical. It had never occurred to me. I'm like, sabbatical, people who take sabbatical, they have it a bit more together, so to speak. So that was December. But by January, I really contemplated about it. I really prayed on it. Now I thought about it. I seeded my husband. You have to seed. And so, and I kept talking about it. And then at some point, he realized how serious I was. And then finally, I consulted with a few people, and then I did it. So I resigned, and when everyone asked me, so where are you going? I'm like, I'm going home. Okay. So by that time, of course, Richard Sets existed. So people also assumed that I was going to the business, but I had gotten very clear instructions from God that it is a sabbatical, and a sabbatical means rest. So I left my employer, also not as well prepared as I would have wanted to be, but it was, when I reflect, it had to be out of obedience, because then it would have been any plans that I have made or whatever it is. So it was a season an action out of obedience. I didn't have things figured out. The only thing I knew was rest. That is very hard for someone who has worked 18 years straight. Wow. Even in high school, I was working. In campus, I was working. Wow. Then another 18 years. Yeah. That was very hard for me. Yeah.
But did it do you some good?
Yes, but that's the point at which all these things that I'm explaining to you, I saw the reality of how unhealthy, or if that's a word, or diseased a lot of areas of my life were. I had moments where my kids would hear me talking about another country on the phone, and they're like, Mom, are you traveling? I'd see certain things that I'd never pick up when I'm working. Or this year in January, I had a video call, and I'd not had a video call in the presence of my children in a long time. And my youngest sort of peeped on my laptop, and so it was a video call, and he sort of, Mom, is this your old job?
Oh, no.
So they have some trauma there.
So I'm like, what?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I promise you, I would not have picked up on some of these things if I was still heavy, career heavy, employment and heavy. So I started therapy. I started all these things. I started therapy. I started going to the gym because of my physical health, being very intentional with my kids, pick up, drop-ups, drop-offs, all those things, just trying to be present. And also just trying to evaluate the state of a lot of my relationships. So I did that for 6 months. I'd said 6 months was the point at which I'd start thinking, am I looking for employment, or am I going to focus on the business that was already existing? But now at 6 months, it was supposed to be a start of that thinking. But at 6 months, certain things happened. That's when I was turning 40. So you know what happens when you're turning 40, just things happen. 40, and then 2 other opportunities came up that if I took them up, I have to have had, I have to have made the decision on whether it was employment or the business. It would not have been both fit.
Yeah.
So so long as those opportunities were there, if I was going to take them, I have to have made that decision because they were gonna shift my profile a little bit. A bit of money, quite a bit of investment was required, and all those things. So either way, long story short, I took a decision for the business, and I said it has to be 100%. CRT, I'm still also looking,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that has made a difference in terms of. So that's really been my transition. So for me, it was more of. So I wasn't necessarily pushed out. I feel like God did ask me to step out, and that was very hard also for my team. My team had a few believers, so when I told them that, they couldn't understand. They're like, really? God can tell you to do that, such a thing. But in my heart of hearts, I believe that's what He had told me to do. As unprepared as I was, I had to do it. It was for rest, and now the focus has been on the business. Yeah, thanks.
I love it. And I really like what you said about like the emotions and the sacrifice.
Yes.
And it's a really good thing that we
Yeah.
do it. Like when we're doing something, we're all in.
Yes.
I used to joke, like for myself, if you'd ever cut me, the company I worked for, that's the blood. It was just
Same thing. I used to say
I
the same
loved.
Yeah.
I
I
was
used to say
happy
the
to
same
do
thing.
anything and give myself
Absolutely.
and give my all.
Yeah.
But there's
Wow.
also seasons.
Yes,
There's also seasons. And that's what I'm saying. If
absolutely.
this is now the season for you to go
Yes.
and give your all to something else, you have
Correct.
to be ready at least a
Absolutely.
little bit.
Yes, yeah.
May, what's your story?
Wow, I'm listening to Naomi here, and I'm just like, my goodness, and yourself as well,
Yeah.
and Saiton, and I'm like, my story is very different.
That's good.
Yeah, but I was just thinking about something that I really believe in, and I've come to believe as I've done what I do, is that work and people are in a symbiotic relationship, and therefore it should be a relationship that works for each other. So as workers,
Yeah. Yeah.
we should get the most out of work, and work can then also get the most out of us, but then
Absolutely.
not rob us, not take away from us, which I feel sometimes that's what happens in corporates, especially.
There's no balance.
There's no balance.
Actually, one of the things I told one of my friends was the scale stopped making sense.
Yes.
At some point, the scale had tipped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Just
you
to
don't
look at
realize
it.
when it does.
Absolutely.
Yes. So now my journey. Mine. First, I want to say that I'm called to people, which I think I failed to say earlier. So my heart and my work, everything I do is about people. So I worked in the aviation industry, and the aviation industry is a very interesting space because it's very complex, it's very highly regulated, very stable, and the opportunities are immense. So I was happy to get into it. I got into it very early on. I think I came out of school and I got this opportunity almost immediately. And I got into customer service. And that was a good foundation for me, especially knowing what my purpose is now, because it is founded on people, and customer service puts you there. It really puts you in a place where you interact, engage with people, get to know how to manage people and manage situations that present themselves around people. Now, fast forward how many years into my area of work? I think 5 years in, I was feeling very jittery, very unsettled. And then this opportunity opened up where the organization was deciding that they would introduce like a centralized planning space or center for the entire operations. So I took a stab at it because I've also always been very good at planning and organizing, and I see patterns, and I'm able to put things together.
Nice.
And then this other aspect of people. So I entered into something we call now what we call workforce planning, but back then we were calling it resource planning, because we were planning for both people and tools and also processes and all those things. And so I got into it, and I found that I actually just applied for a job because I was frustrated. I applied for that job because I was frustrated. So I got into it. I didn't know what it was about, but then I found that it was something I really enjoyed. It came so easy for me. I would be like, so I'm planning for like about 1,000 people or whatever number of people, and someone is like, how are you doing that? And I'm like, but it's so easy. But then now later is when I realized that it's just a gift and a challenge. It's a gift that God has given me, and it's a challenge that I was able to nurture. So I did that. I started with planning in the operational stages. Then I moved to longer term planning, and then now I was doing strategic planning in terms of workforce. And maybe just to give an introduction of what workforce planning is, because I'm saying these things.
And we're probably all wondering.
And people are wondering, because I know most people wonder what is workforce planning. So simply put, workforce planning is having the right people with the right skills at the right place for the right duration at the right time and at the right cost. So it's basically getting it right around people. Interestingly, that should be like a no-brainer that every organization should do that. Yeah. But strangely enough, not everyone considers it with the intentionality that it demands. So in my work there, in this organization, I got such, I like to say that I had a vertical experience because of the hierarchical experience, and now horizontal because of the reach that I had. So I was planning for about 54 stations, let me call them that, in different countries across the world. So I needed to understand the dynamics of the different cultures across the employment laws, the dynamics, the demographics, and what works for us. And then also looking vertically, looking at what the organization is determining for our future, and how do we propel that without affecting this. So I found myself in a very interesting place. And then I was also working with various stakeholders across the plane, because now of the many different organizations that plugged into this one organization to make things work. So I was very fortunate to have such great experience. Now, with all that, you know how organizations are interesting, because at some point when I was moving in my last role, I felt very shortchanged. And I was given this role.
We're all laughing knowingly.
I was given this role, and then I was not compensated accordingly. And I raised it over and over again until a point where it reached, I was asked, are you going to take the offer or not?
Yeah.
And so I sat with the Lord and I asked him, so what do we do? Because I was really aggrieved. And I felt it was such great injustice. Yeah. So and the Lord told me that you need to determine what it is you're going after. Are you going after the money, or are you going after the experience and what it is that I'm going to teach you through this role? So that was a setup for me to prepare for out here. And I didn't know that. So I did that. I carried out that role for 3 years. But I remember, for as long as I can think back, I think 2015 is when I started feeling that I needed to step out. 2015, I had that urge. And then, do you know what we normally do? You look for the people. You look for other people.
To
You're
affirm.
To affirm. You were there like, so see, we do this thing. Yes, I think we should do this. So we had a meeting. We plan. We go out with our with our takeouts and and then 2016 comes again, we have the same one meeting, same people, then again 2017, until one day I asked myself, girl, are you going to continue doing this and just being in a place of disobedience because God has said it's time to step out? So I remember talking to my pastor and talking to my dad. And my dad was like, unaenda wapi? Where are you going
course.
without a job?
Yes.
You have a job that is stable, permanent and
Pensionable.
pensionable. So we are not going anywhere. And I think the person who actually helped me a lot was my pastor, because they guided me to a coach, a career coach. And so that brought a lot of light, because one of the things that she told me was to plan to exit. So plan in the sense of think about how much are your
Finances.
plan your finances, do your business plan. What is think about your solution. As you can understand from my explanation, it's not something that many people know about. So there was also that challenge I was going to face. So think about how you're going to position yourself in the market, start identifying who are your clients and all these things. So start thinking about it ahead of time. So this was, I think, around 2018. Then 2019 came, and I was still doing, I found doing did you guys find doing a business plan so difficult?
Yes, of course. It's not easy.
It is not easy. But 2020 came and we shut down. And I remember, because for where my role, I couldn't, we shut down, but I couldn't shut down. I continued working, because we had to do iterations of coming back to work. What does that mean? Who are we bringing back? And all those things. So because COVID was not expected, the shutdown was not expected to be
Take as long as it did.
Yes, it took longer than anyone
Yeah.
thought it would. And then, so I continued doing that. And I remember working with the HRBP at the time, and I told him, do you know what? I'm not coming back. I am not. The day I'm coming back, I'm coming to give my resignation. And true to that, in the same year, 2020, in December, actually November, the voice of the Lord was so clear. It is time. There's no pushing this any longer. Whether you have the money or not. I forgot to mention I had a loan, which was like a noose around my head, around my neck. You're thinking of making this move, and you're like,
But
you don't have like much in terms of savings and all that. But interestingly enough, because I had planned, I don't know how, with God, 1 + 1 is not equal to. It's so interesting, because somehow I managed to clear out the loan. And then we had been given like percentages of our salaries. So the balance of the percentage was being kept as to be given later when the business is back. So it was like being forced to save more than 70% of your salary. And it was so interesting. So I had that. I had my pension. I had all these savings that I had. And I remember doing my monies and my math. And I was like, fine. I can be able to talk to my dad about it.
Yeah, so now you made the step.
So I made the move.
Okay.
So what happened that was also coincidental is that it happened to come together with an offer to take early retirement. So which I did. They kind of refused, but then they also gave it to me eventually, and I came out. And that was 2021. And it's been amazing. I'm not trying to glamorize being an entrepreneur, but I think when you step out at the right time, it is well worth it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very true. Wow. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that story, May.
Yeah.
And I think these conversations have been really rich and interesting, with so many little tips and nuggets. So I want to ask us, as we come to a close, if you could think of this one thing, if you could look back to, obviously it will be a younger self, because we're younger then, even if it's a couple of months young. What one tip would you like to give someone who is in a similar position as you were those years ago or those months ago?
Okay, I probably have more than one, but
Okay.
let me first start with the one. There's something May said that really connected with me, that being aggrieved at work. So I was also aggrieved for more or less the same reasons, same exact thing. Positions given, but not without commensurate, and you keep pushing it because you feel like it's such a deep injustice. And while I enjoyed the work and my colleagues, I feel like that being aggrieved took away perspective for me. Like I wasn't able to see everything else on the table. I wasn't able to see the great experience that I was gaining. I wasn't able to celebrate the achievements that I was making, and I wasn't able to see past the thing that had me aggrieved. And so, to a younger self, what I would say is, one, stop expecting work to be perfect and to meet all your needs.
Yes.
I think if I had that different perspective, and it would have been easier for me to disconnect that pain that came with being aggrieved and the bitterness that came with it, because I feel like sometimes that can really eat you up and you don't actually see everything else. So for me, that would have been one of the major things. So disconnect that and go to therapy early.
Yeah.
Because I think what therapy does, it helps you give you focus and perspective. And what that I felt did for me in later years was help me see the entire picture. Because it's not just about the pain points that you have, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about that. So if to anyone who's in that place, seek somebody who can give you perspective and help you see the larger picture and help you plan out your life. Because you waste time being so aggrieved. Even if it's an injustice, there are other ways to handle it. If the normal channels are not working, there are other ways to handle it. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest. To add a second one, what Naomi said about health. One of the things that I think should be assigned to people is if you're constantly getting sick.
That's true.
I think that is such a red flag. We don't think it's work or the stress levels or anything. I kept getting sick. I was constantly in hospital. I was constantly taking sick leaves. And you go to the doctor and you don't feel yourself. You feel like there's something wrong, but they can't figure out what it is. And it was constant. And then when I left in 2020, for about 9 months, I was home and I was fine.
Same.
Perfectly
Same.
fine.
Same.
I got something else for 3 months and I was in hospital within 3 weeks. It was even more stressful than where I'd come from. And for me, my body is very clear about how unhappy, the stress levels. So for me, that's such a big tell. But also what I would say is, if that is you right now, take care of your health, take care of your not just your body, but your mental health. Figure out other ways to deal with the stress, even as you're planning how to exit or where to exit to. I feel like the cost is so high, you cannot even begin to explain how the quality of life that's stolen from you when you compare this one and this other one. It's too high a price.
It is. And Saiton, I think even as you plan, just that initial step of planning, it means you're actively doing something about your health. So already it will shift the scales and you'll start feeling a little bit better. Yeah, so I totally agree. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. Any other tips?
Maybe a tip, not necessarily to my younger self, but to anyone considering transition.
Yeah.
And I think we'll discuss a little bit more of that in the masterclass. But I think something that I am currently working through, so it's very raw in me, is understanding what does employment give you. And I'll flesh it out a little bit. I wouldn't want us to be perceived to be demonizing employment or demonizing corporate, because there are a lot of benefits of being in that environment. There's a lot of benefits in learning the structure and learning processes and learning what good looks like, I mean, you attribute a lot of your current successes based on the experience that you gain in corporate. So we are not doing that at all. So it gives you experience, it gives you tools, it gives you, it gives you so much that then as an entrepreneur, then it gives you a leg up in many ways, having been in corporate. And so in no way are we demonizing employment and corporate. But there are some intangibles that I feel like perhaps I used to get from being employed that I'm currently not getting, so to speak.
Yes.
Let me give you an example. There's an affirmation you get.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
when you're doing
We're laughing knowingly
yes,
again.
you know,
Yes.
you know, you're doing your work well.
Yeah.
The accolades come.
Yes.
You know, all those things come. The promotions come. All those things. It does something to you, and you almost sort of get used to.
It becomes your identity.
Exactly.
There you go.
And that's the second piece where your work becomes your identity, right? So the moment you step out, you sort of almost ask yourself, so what am I now?
Who am I?
You know, who am I?
Your
Okay.
position opens doors.
Absolutely.
And so you
you
don't
say
know-
you're who, you're head of
and then-
streaming, this happens, you know?
And then you don't know what to do when that's taken away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm basically trying to say is if you're thinking about transition, we've talked about finances, we've talked about, but there are some intangibles, there are some intrinsic things that your job over a period of time come to give you or define you and all those things.
Yeah.
And the moment that plug is pulled, it's pulled.
Yep.
Like you feel the difference. So the question
Yeah.
becomes, how do you sort of reframe if you're in a situation where you've not transitioned, but how do you reframe what success looks like based on what God, defines it to be? And so my second point here would be, and I'll quickly jump into it, is, I mean, I really do hope and pray that everyone who will be watching and listening is a believer and they believe in God. But if you're not, find a higher power, because your life has to be about something more.
Yeah.
There has to be something more. There has to be where you are sort of, how do I explain it? But there has to be a higher power in your life. Because even in terms of perspective beyond therapy, that focusing on something higher than yourself really gives you a different perspective and a different shift.
Yeah.
So I'll focus on those intrinsics in terms of what are you consciously or unconsciously getting from your current place before you have a sense that your season is shifting, your season has come, your time has come. But is there a way you can prepare psychologically, emotionally for some of these things? And maybe you may never be fully prepared, but it's just for you to know that there will be some intrinsic things that you will feel, oh, okay, perhaps this is something I'd not considered, that then it's not unique to you.
Yeah.
And therefore, there's some work that there's a journey that you might have to walk on as your season shifts, so to speak.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Yeah, so
Naomi.
that's what I
Thank
share.
you.
Yeah, I really like that because I have a contention. Well, we are not demonizing employment. I think it's just what it stems from my passion around the youth and unemployment, the high levels of unemployment. And one of the things we also do at Kotoya is we redefine work. We have a program for the young people around work and redefining what work really is, because work is not employment is an expression of work.
Yeah.
It's one expression of work.
Expression of work, yeah.
And it's not everything. But then I think the way we have been raised, maybe our society, that's what it has been, synonymous with work. But work is so much more. It's not also only business. It's so much more. So the one thing I would say, adding to what these amazing ladies have said, is to the person who is looking to jump ship. First, believe in yourself. Just take the step. But take it at the right time. Plan yourself, and as she said, the God that you believe in will take you there. But one thing that has happened to me is that I've had a mindset shift. Corporates and business, my
Very
God,
different.
very different animals. And the natural progression is that you come out of corporates and you're kind of like continuing on with but no, it's very different. Initially, you're everything. You're removing this hat of strategy. You put it. You're now taking marketing. You're now the accountant.
Yes.
You're now you're everything. But it's just come out of it. Come out knowing that you will need a different kind of thinking and a different kind of skill set to navigate the business world. But believe in yourself. If many of us have made it, people ahead of us have made it, we all will get there, and it will be well worth it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies.
Yeah, we'd like
My
to hear
tips.
yours.
Yeah, I was going to say I have tips, but they are just what you've said. That's what I wrote down in the morning before I met you guys. So I have work out your emotions. So work out your emotions and how you feel about being in this corporate setting. And I completely agree. I think my experience in the corporate world, and I was fortunate enough to work for multinationals and really good American, very human-centered organizations. And I had a very strong identity in my work. So one of the things that thankfully got dismantled while I was still there is my identity to work. It was not easy, it was painful, but I had to separate that because I am much more. And I like what you said a couple of days ago around what is work, what is employment. Have we collapsed the two and made them think it's the same thing? It isn't.
Yeah.
And then I heard Viola Davis say something today. Do you guys know Viola Davis?
Yeah.
How to Get Away with Murder. I think that's her famous.
Yeah.
And she said something. She said, your purpose is not what you do. It's what happens to people when you do what you do. So purpose has an element of service.
Yeah.
So you can be in purpose when you're in corporate, and then the season comes to an end, and you need to go and serve somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I think the point about transition is to figure out what your next season is before it's there. Of course, if you've been pushed out of the ship rather than being given the opportunity to jump, then you might be in a position where you now need to think, okay, what do I do? Which comes to my second tip is write down a plan.
Yeah.
Even if hata kama huna plan, even if there's nothing that's coming to mind, just sit, pray, ask God to help you. Say, write down your vision. I want to rescue whatever, pets that don't have a home. It can be really anything. But whatever that thing that's tugging at your heart, at your soul, at your mind, likely it's linked to your purpose and it's linked to how you can serve the world. So write it down, and then number 3, I'd say commit it. Commit it to God. Just say, this is what I'm thinking. I don't know how to get here. I don't know what steps to take, and He will order your steps. And even for us, we continue to grow. We don't know everything. We're still learning.
Oh, yes.
Still on the journey.
It's still a journey.
Still being redefined by God.
Completely. He's redefining us. But one thing I can say, at least for myself, is I'm enjoying it. And I am at such peace. I'm so grateful. I'm very peaceful.
I wanted to just jump in and
Yes.
add one last bit that I think is important is that in this journey of entrepreneurship, people are very important. Like this circle that you have. Like for me, I know it was my parents that really, really supported me because you need that support. But also once I remember talking about the hearts and hearts, but at some point you can't do it by yourself. So you'll need people and build a team that will help you get to where you need to go. And another thing you mentioned about purpose. I like this illustration that Ikigai, there's an Ikigai drawing. When you Google, it will give you the things that you're passionate about, things that you're good at, things that you're things that you're good at, things that you're passionate about, experience, and your and the experiences and your qualifications, and where they merge. That's your purpose. So if you use that as a simple illustration or guide on how to identify. If you are not clear on what your purpose is, that can be helpful. Thank you.
I love it. So thank you very much. We will share the details of the masterclass, which we want to invite you to attend. It will be about 1.5 hours where we'll actually give practical tips. So we'll just go maybe one level down on the conversation we've had today, give you practical tips. We'll leave you with some workbooks. We'll touch on basically all areas of transition, including the emotional, the preparedness, the financial preparedness, as best as we can. And we know you will be successful in your transition. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me today. I've had such a good time. And I'm glad that we are continuing to have this conversation. So thank you and see you next time.
Thank you.